This is what I was looking forward to, was getting this big thing up on its legs. There's still a lot of work to do, and I was just kind of thinking in my head all the little things left to get it in shape before it's really labeled as a finished project. So I've got to go and put the outer boards on here and lock these legs into place. I've got to take this and trim it down and get it kind of all settled. I need to put the leg vise on. I need to cut these ends off. I need to put the tail vise on. I need to drill dog holes. I need to actually put the lag bolts in to secure it to the tabletop. So there's a lot to do still, but it's really satisfying just to get it to this point. So let me go ahead and start knocking off a lot of those little things that need to be done and bringing it one step closer to finished. Okay, so here's a little bit of an awkward view for you. It's from the floor looking up, and these are the lag bolts that I'm sticking into the bottom to secure the tabletop to the legs. So kind of what I've had to do here is I've got a half-inch bit for the lag bolt, and it's on a long extension thing, and then I'm using my driver and getting it as tight as I can, then coming back up with a little T-square handle to get it the rest of the way. So let me show you how this works. So that's about as far as I can get it with the driver. And then what I do is I come back with this little T-handle right here, and I just go back in and give it the last few turns to get it to tighten down. Oh, there we go. All right. And that is, that's stout. It's not going anywhere. All right, I've got a few more of these to do, and then I can get on to some more stuff with the sides, cutting those off to length and everything else. This is the center walnut board, and I'm just doing a little card scraping on here just to kind of clean up the surface. I've got some marks from the jointer and stuff, so just kind of clean it up a little bit, and then I'll sand it. But there's a couple little grooves in here. I've got a couple little tiny nicks in my jointer, and so I'm just taking those lines out. And the card scraper is great for that. There's also a little tear out because this is some figured walnut. And so there's a little tear out in here from running over there. I couldn't help it. Didn't matter which way I ran it through the jointer, it kind of was getting a little tear out. So I'm just trying to clean those up a little bit as well. All right. Okay, so here's my center board right here. I've got a couple of spacers in the middle right now just to keep the boards separated because they're not attached to the legs. So what I need to do now is figure out, I mean, this board is a set length. I can maybe shave, I don't know, a 1/16 or so off the end of each of the ends of this board right here, but pretty much I want to keep it the length it is. So what I'm going to do is figure out how long I can make the ends of the table here. I'm kind of roughing this in, so if I look at where my shortest board is down at the other end of the table, if I look at my shortest board down there, and then I look at where I am here, this is where I'm going to cut off. I want that end to hang longer down at that end, just because I've got a tail vise that's going in there. So I think right here is pretty much where I'm going to put the line for this one. So what I'm going to need to do, because this gives me just a little bit of hang over here to trim this off nice and flush, and it'll come up perfectly even with this end of the table. So let me get a pencil here and strike a line, and that way I know where I'm going to cut this off. I'm not going to cut it yet, but I want to have those lines laid out now because things are going to revolve around that measurement. Alright, so this is about how wide this end of the table is going to be. It's not going to be very far from the end of this leg. It's only going to be 6 inches or so from there. So let me go ahead and strike a line on here. Now that I know how long I need to make this. And let's see. Move it back just a fraction. There we go. So I'm going to trim about this much off. You can see the boards aren't equal on here. I was always planning on cutting this off, so I figured it didn't really matter if I had, you know, some longer than the others. As long as I had a line on here that would allow me to cut off an even amount and make it look good on the end. So that's my layout line there. I did the one on the other end as well. And now I know how much I can actually take off of this board, and it just gives me a way of making sure that I don't do too much to this tabletop to ruin this board right here. So, all right, now I think the next thing I'm going to do. Okay, so one reason for marking the end lines of my table where I'm going to cut is that I need to put this last side slab, this last side piece onto the table. This is going to lock in on this right here. So this angle is cut into the leg, and then I'm going to cut that same angle onto a board, except it's going to go this way, and then that is going to lock in there. I'm going to have another one in the middle, a longer piece, and then another shorter one on the other end. And that's going to kind of just help lock this leg assembly into the tabletop. It's kind of a nice little decorative thing. So I kept a lot of these cutoffs that I had. They're not too long, but what it allows me to do is go from the end of the table here and then measure out, cut that angle, and I can actually cut it long and sneak up on that cut and then just trim off the edge down here. So I think that's what I'm going to do now is find this angle right here on this leg and then go to the bandsaw, or actually I'll probably go to the table saw just so I can get that precise angle and start sneaking up on this just to make sure I have this angle right. And that's why I left myself a lot of board here. This is pretty long, so I can get, you can see I can get more than enough out of this cutoff right here to fit in this leg location. All right, so that's the next thing, is to measure this angle and then replicate that over on the table saw. Okay, so I've got this little angle guide right here, and I'm going to use this to at least get me close to what that angle is. So I'm going to just kind of sneak up on it here, right there, and that tells me that that is, oh goodness, what is that, 103 degrees? So anyway, I'm going to go and set this same angle over on my table saw and then make a test cut and see how close I am to getting that to fit perfectly in that key. All right, let's go over to the table saw. Okay, so I set my my fence here at 13 degrees, which is hopefully approximately where I need to be. So let's go ahead and make a cut, and then I'll compare that with the notch in the leg, and we'll see how we did. Okay, so hopefully this will give you a better idea about what I'm talking about. I've cut this piece and it was about 13 degrees, and there you can see where it fits perfectly into that side, and then that will be making that a good tabletop surface and locking that in. So that makes the leg flush with the side of the table and gives a little rigidity and a little more hold down to those legs. So I just have a few more pieces to do. I'm going to cut the end pieces, and then I'll sneak up on that middle piece because I think they're probably slightly different angles on each one because I cut them on the bandsaw and I'm not going to say how straight they are. All right, so let me get working on those. Okay, you can see that I've already done the, I call it a keystone, and also a dovetail, whatever you want to call it, this table leg joinery right here. So I've already done this side, and everything's all flush and matched up, and it looks really good. So I have one more section to do on the other side, and that is over here. So I've done the end pieces, so I got the piece on here and on the other end, but I've got the middle section that still has to be done. So I cut this board right here, and you can see that it has to fit between this dovetail right there and this one right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start measuring the angles, cut one angle, get it perfect. I've got a test piece that I use for that right there. And then I will fit that, then I'll cut the test angle on the other side and then start working out, just taking little pieces off the end and just kind of get that fit so it's nice and tight and looks really good. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how I get those measurements. Okay, so I've just got this simple little angle finder in here, and the first thing I'm going to do, there's a couple different ways I could use it. I could try to come in this way and get the angle. Sometimes I'll take it off of the board here and get the angle going this way. So there's a couple different methods to use. They should, either way, should give me the correct angle. But I'm going to take it from the tabletop because this is my main line right here. I want this line right here and this line right here. These are my two main angles. If this is off a little bit down here, I can do some shims and stuff, but this is my angle. I need to find this angle right here. So this tells me that it is about 11 degrees. Okay, so now that I have my starting angle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the center pin out of my Craig miter gauge here and just loosen the handle and dial in 11 degrees and make a test cut with my test board, and then put that board into the dovetail over there, or the keystone, or whatever you want to call it, and see how that fit is. So let me get that 11 degrees in there. Alright, now I just have to get my test. Okay, here's the test board. Now all I have to do is raise my blade and make a test cut. Okay, so now I can just take this piece and slide it right in here. Now this board is actually just a little lower than the table surface, which is why it became test and not usable wood. But you can see that my angle was not really that accurate. Hopefully you can see that. Let me zoom out a little bit and you can see that, okay, you can see the angle that this board is coming down at, that I have way too much angle on my dovetail and not enough on this. So I'm off by, gosh, at least a couple of degrees. I'm going to check that angle again just to see what went wrong with that cut, because that was really not even close. Okay, so I must have bumped my gauge because I actually should have been at 15, not 11, so I'm about 4 degrees off. So let me reset, recut, and let's try that again. Okay, so you can see that my final setting for the first side was 15, actually it was about 14 and, I don't know, 14.8 degrees, but that got me a good fit, so let me show you that. Okay, so here's my test piece, and basically what I like to do is just have it right at the top of the table. I use my thumbs to just kind of feel that top and line it up, and then slide that right into the joint, and I should have no wiggle. When it's flush up here, it's flush up at the top, and it's nice and tight against that joint, and I have no wiggle in there at all. So there's no gaps in here. There's a little gap down here because this board is just a little less wide than the tabletop, but it's flush at the top, and it's flush down through here. So I know that this is the first angle for this part of the tabletop. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this angle while I've got it set on the table saw, and then I'll move on to measuring and cutting the other angle at the other end. Okay, so here's the first joint that I cut with the table saw set up for that test board. And you can see I actually also, you want to make sure when you do this that you don't get confused about which is your face side and which is the side that's going to be glued. This actually has a couple of dings on there, so I want to make sure that this is on the side that it gets glued. So just to remind myself, I wrote on here that this is the face and then this is the up direction side, because this is the grain up here that I want to show at the top of the table. So now I have to measure that joint at the other end and start doing test cuts to get that one fit. Okay, so before I actually take a measurement on this leg, I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is not exactly a straight cut right here. And I don't know if you can see it when I put this file against there. There's a little bit of a gap right in the middle right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this file and just make sure that I flatten this edge out before I take a measurement, and that way I get a nice tight fit in this joint. All right, so that's much flatter, and that will give me a better joint now when I go to make this cut. Okay, so I found the angle that's going to work best, and then what I did was I stuck one end to the to one dovetail, and now I drew a line kind of up the back of this board with the edge of the other dovetail, and I'm going to cut wide of this line. I'm not cutting on this line, I'm going to cut a little wide of this line, and then just kind of work my way up, just shave a little bit off at a time until I get a nice tight fit. All right, after a little massaging and just a little bit of sanding on the edges and the corners, you can see that I've got this just ready to go in. And I haven't put it in all the way because I haven't put any glue on there. I've got my my big Bessie parallel clamps ready to go on there. You can see I had to take the bottom pads off to get it to fit in the middle slot here. They were just a little too wide, so I took the bottom pads off, but I'm going to go ahead and get this glued up and then go ahead and kind of smack it in place and let the glue do its job. It's taken me a long time to get to this point, and if you want to watch all the progress from the beginning, be sure to check out the other videos in the series, starting from the rough mill-up of the lumber all the way to putting on the legs and making the base and everything else. The only thing left I have to do are the vices. I've got an end vise and a leg vise that I'm working on the side. I'm going to do some video of the installation of those once I get them ready to go. And then that'll be that. So do me a favor, if you could, hit the subscribe button. Check out the other videos. I'd really appreciate it. All right, take care.